everybody. We're going to discuss a topic that's very close to my heart today. But first, just to introduce myself very quickly, I'm Leah Callon-Butler, Director of Emfarsis, which is an advisory firm focused on Web3 for social impact. I also write an opinion column for CoinDesk, which is mainly about how crypto is being adopted across Southeast Asia. And I wrote and narrated an award-winning documentary about NFT gaming in the Philippines titled Play to Earn. Oh, thank you. You've seen it. Thanks, guys. If you haven't seen it, check it out on YouTube. It's called Play to Earn. But I'd love to throw to our panelists. I'm joined today by Constance, Basil, and Jillian. So, Constance, you want to just quickly introduce yourself as well?
Hi, guys. My name is Constance. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for FTX. Happy to be here today.
Hi everyone, Basil Askari, I'm co-founder and CEO of MidChains, a small regulated crypto exchange and custodian in Abu Dhabi.
Hey everyone, I'm Jillian Bethel. I'm the CEO of OKX Bahamas.
Thanks, guys. So we were having a bit of a chat before this panel, and Jillian raised a great question about, what is empowerment? What do we actually mean by that in crypto? And we just thought that'd be a great thing to just kind of set the tone. What does it mean to you, Jillian? What does empowerment actually mean in this space of crypto?
Yeah, sure. So I had a very, very profound moment at some point in my life between leaving medicine and switching over to crypto, and that profound moment had to do with three things. The speed and efficiency of access, the movement of information, people and things, and money. And thinking about those things, I think when we can really, really take those three things and maximize them, then we have the framework to empower many, many people. The things around those three things that need to happen are the access to those three things, and then the creativity developed from those three things. So the movement of information, the movement of people and things, and the movement of money. And obviously, crypto is the movement of money in a very, very efficient way and a very, very trustless way that can really, really help with empowerment. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Did you guys want to add anything to that in terms of what empowerment means to you in this space?
I like to think about empowerment as like something that would move the society forward. So there's always need to be something pushing the society forward. Like 20 years ago, people would not be imagining that we can fly around, talk to people on internet so easily. And crypto and blockchain could be something that really push our life to another level, to something that we might not even able to imagine now, like in 2 decades.
I think the way I think about it as well is that it's also taking the idea of financial independence for individuals and for institutions that are maybe don't have as much access to the wider capital markets and traditional finance.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some of the use cases that you're seeing? Over where I'm based in the Philippines, remittance was something that people talked a lot about in terms of blockchain being able to make remittances faster, cheaper, which can make a huge impact on people's lives. More recently, we've seen the rise of play to earn and blockchain games as a way for people to make an income. And even things like NFT creators and artists who are able to now access a global digital economy to sell their artworks. What are you seeing in your areas of the world? Basil, what are you seeing?
So I think the appetite for NFTs, for crypto products, is massive in the region. If we look at kind of just the broad demographics of the Middle East in general, you have a population of millennials and Gen Z that it's about 250 million. That's huge. Many of them are growing into some wealth and historically have had parents who've only really invested in real estate and nothing else. And now they suddenly have access to global financial markets, but are interested in what's new and innovative. And this is the side which intrigues them. So for that group, it's very attractive. And I would say that the demand is much higher than traditional products.
Yeah. I think crypto provides really an infrastructure for a lot more people to be a lot more creative with the financial products that are out there. And so you can potentially open up, our financial system to a lot more things that are useful for people. For instance, I know there are a couple systems that are native to certain places. Like in the Bahamas, we have the ASU, and I know a few people who have tried to put this on the blockchain, and they're still working toward it. But it's like we now have the power to take that from an institutional place and let creativity among the people really like develop those things. And so use cases, financial products are just all the way up there. Yeah.
So one of the things recently I found out which really interests me was a month ago I went to Dubai, and our local Dubai team told me the top 5 banks in Dubai moved their user KYC onto blockchain. So if you open one account with one bank, and when you want to open with another bank, they will retrieve your KYC information from the blockchain, which is amazing. Like, save you tons of time, and you don't have to submit and fill up the same form over and over again, right? That's like the cost of time opportunity cost, which is the most expensive cost ever. So that really impressed me and makes me thinking whether I want to move to Dubai. So. So I think those things are things that I just mentioned that would move our life forward, that you no longer stay at where you are, you change your status quo. And I think that's one of the most important things we want to think about crypto, want to think about blockchain, that how it changes our life, how it no longer just like a financial tools. It's no longer something that we buy and sell, but it's something actually change our life.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you just said about, filling out multiple forms and, standing in lines is something that I can absolutely resonate with in terms of living in the Philippines. And it's probably something that I think some Western economies probably take for granted. Even just having access to things like a bank account or a credit card or being able to get a loan. So, Constance, I'd love to hear from you because I know that you have an amazing global perspective on this. How do you see that the adoption of crypto is different in, say, developed economies versus developing economies?
That's a very interesting question. So to give the audience a little bit background, one of my major responsibility at FTX is to run the global business. I travel to many countries and regions to set up offices and set up operations. One thing I noticed really, really interests me is how the crypto adoption is different in emerging markets and developed markets. So in terms of developed markets, we're talking about countries like Australia, North Americas, European countries. And emerging markets, we're developing countries. We're talking about African countries, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. So one really interesting example I have went through recently is I went to Senegal in February. And I'm really into arts. So I went to one of their oldest and more established art gallery, and I was trying to purchase 2 pieces of arts. Their credit card machine, the terminal was broken. And it's not only that's not only the place that the terminal was broken. The terminal was broken in multiple places. But in other places, I was thinking like maybe it's just like a small shop, so that's why it doesn't work. But in a huge art gallery, it's broken as well. So the owner told me they only accept cash or mobile money. So he put out his phone, showed me a QR code, like this is the app we use. You literally, no bank account needed. You just send your money to the app, and I scan your QR code, and I transfer the money to him. Of course, I didn't have that. Our local team helped me facilitate that. But that's exactly what you do when you transfer money from wallet to wallet on blockchain, right? You scan a QR code or you key in an address. Sometimes if you cannot remember the address, you screenshot, you save your QR code. So then I was talking to our African team. They told me because Africa was left out from the credit card and payment decade. So now they are leap forward to the digital asset era. And they completely just, I don't want to say they give up, but they were thinking that the bank account and credit card now is less important when they have this digital money going on in their society. And I see similar things in Southeast Asia countries. I see similar things in Latin America. While in the developed world, like Europe, Australia, Americas, their existing financial system is very established. They have a perfect payment system, which takes about 3 business days for you to wire something. And everyone was kind of got used to that. And you never question. Sometimes you say, oh, that's slow, but that's fine, right? But for the age, for the young people, they cannot even stand waiting for 1 second to load a web page, leave alone waiting 3 days to wire money. So that really triggered me to think that how crypto adoption is different in emerging market, that the emerging market by nature is so friendly to crypto adoption, while we see so much friction to push crypto forward in developed countries because of their existing system, because of their strong fiat currencies, and also because of the government's requirement on regulations. So this is something that really interesting. I haven't seen many people noticing the difference, but it's great we are talking about this today. So if you guys want to think about that more, look into that more, that's a really interesting area to look into.
Yeah, it's interesting how the lack of those legacy systems can actually be a benefit to some of these economies that have that leapfrog potential. But you touched on this just earlier, Basil. It's not just that infrastructure opportunity, but I think also the appetite of those youth generations as well. Like, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think the way I see it as well is that, I love that you brought up the blockchain system for onboarding with banks. But I'm having flashbacks of a banker who came into our office to witness wet ink signatures.
Wow.
And that in the same country as what you're talking about and what's coming up. So there's a huge rift that we see. And I think a large part of it is lack of uniform regulations across a country or a jurisdiction. So for example, in the UAE, it's quite a complex place. You ultimately have a federal authority, state authorities, and then free zones that are all looking to do things themselves. We ended up setting up in one of the free zones, Abu Dhabi Global Markets, which is our home. I happen to be from Abu Dhabi, so it was an easy choice there. But they were also the first jurisdiction in the UAE to actually write comprehensive crypto regulation. And having that around is super important, but it's also important to bear in mind that these regulations shouldn't be ever too overburdensome or try to retrofit traditional financial regulation, and then eventually the innovation is gone at that point. So it's very, very important to strike that balance where we're keeping the end consumer or institutions that are working with us safe, but at the same time innovating and being able to move forward.
Yeah, I can't agree more with that. Sometimes it feels like if they're taking older regulation, it's almost like taking something that was built for a horse and cart and retrofitting it to a rocket ship. So that's definitely very important. So, what are some of the barriers? I mean, we've talked a lot about the opportunities here and how it really is transforming the shape of economies, but what are some of the barriers that still exist in terms of helping to onboard more people? Jillian, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So Constance and Basil, they both just talked about the creativity and wanting to onboard this new thing. And Constance talked a lot about the infrastructure. Here, I think we're talking about access, right? One of the big barriers for empowering people is obviously the access. And I think right now in our space, we're moving in the right direction to get everybody onboarded and get everybody where they need to be. But we do have this system of regulation and these regulatory frameworks. The direction that I think we are moving in is creating some space for people who may not fall directly in an infrastructured system like Constance mentioned, i.e. KYC and going to the banks. I mean, there are people who are always going to fall outside of this. And it's important for us to create access for those types of people, people who, where the instability of the government, like Constance mentioned, doesn't give them the access to some of the financial systems. And so access in terms of changing the regulatory framework. I know the panel next is all about regulatory stuff, so access in terms of changing a little bit of the regulatory system or the regulatory frameworks to give those people some in the system is one of the barriers that crypto really helps.
Yeah, there's definitely a balancing act between financial inclusion and financial integrity, And I see that sort of playing out a lot. Have you seen any good examples in terms of these sorts of emerging markets where you're rolling out crypto products? Some good examples in terms of how we can have inclusive frameworks that are helping people adopt these products. Any good examples? Maybe, Constance, have you seen?
So I couldn't think of any good examples. I think overall nobody knows what they are trying to do, regardless of whether it's developed countries or developing countries. And I think the difference is attitude. Whether you are open to think about what kind of crypto framework you want to have, or you are thinking about, okay, cool, this is something disruptive, we need to control it. So that's the major difference we see when we talk to different governments. And in emerging markets, I'm not saying that the developed countries' government is not friendly, but in the emerging markets, their government is way more open and friendly to start thinking what kind of regulatory framework they want to set up. And but of course, we also see the trend that the developed countries will always move first, and then the developing countries will follow the suit. But of course, now everyone have already started talking about it, thinking about it, and FTX. One of FTX's mission is to help as many government and jurisdictions to figure out the suitable regulatory framework for them. So we have put in a lot of effort in that as part of the work we do for developing our global markets.
And I think there's one example that is not crypto, but can be applied to crypto. And that's right here in the Bahamas. We have our payment service providers. They're able to onboard clients without KYC to a limit of a certain amount, like $500, I think it is, or $1,000. That's enough of a volume to help somebody who can't be KYC in developing and sometimes even developed countries. That exists, and if we, even though the regulatory framework here is made from the ground up for crypto, that's something that we can apply to crypto to definitely use now the crypto infrastructure to push that same type of inclusion toward people with a more robust system. Yeah.
I think one of, on that note, on Julian's note, I think one of the easiest thing that we have done so far is to push crypto payment forward. But when I say crypto payment, is the crypto was more like an infrastructure layer for the payments. So on the service level, people pay for dollar, but or like if some people want to pay by crypto, and then we will partner up with a payment processor to convert it to fiat and pay the merchants. So that's something that we start seeing more and more interest and popularity global-wise, especially a lot of people want to start purchasing properties or even citizenships through crypto, which is something like a lot of Caribbean governments are looking into actively right now.
I agree with that point. We're seeing a lot of this type of activity in the Middle East as well, real estate, cars, different types of payments. I think where we see still a lot of resistance, though, is the banks. The banking sector is still very, very much set in its ways, even in the Middle East, takes its best practices from developed markets, and we kind of go in circles despite there being regulation. So having regulation seems to be that this is the way forward, and certainly it is. But then at the same time, once that regulation's out and you get your licenses, you still need to continue educating the banks, and that is an ongoing process.
Yeah, I like your idea around regulation that is fit for purpose and is based on the actual risk involved. So if we are talking about, say, retail customers that are only transacting in very small amounts, then minimal KYC is great. But it does seem to be that we need to make a distinction too in terms of the impact of retail versus, say, institutional adoption in some of these emerging markets. Basil, we were having a great chat about that the other day. Maybe you could explain a little bit more about the value that even institutional adoption can bring to these economies.
Sure. So most of our business to date has been institutional. Two of our backers happen to be sovereign wealth funds in Abu Dhabi. And I can say I didn't have any gray hair before they invested. But what's important there is that these are trusted government or very large institutions that have been in financial services for decades, household names, people understand them, people draw comfort for them across generations. So it's not just young people or older people. And at the end of the day, those types of institutions still move the majority of capital across the world in whatever shape or form it takes, whatever product it takes. And bringing those into the fold, as far as adoption goes, in my opinion, brings a level of comfort to the asset class, comfort to the product, to the service providers, to everyone in the ecosystem, and overall grows the whole space for everyone. And I think that's an important part of global adoption, is to have that layer of comfort there, because someone who may want to enter into crypto may be on the fence, may be uncomfortable, but sees that, okay, I know for example, a fund that's owned by a government X or government Y is getting into it, maybe it's not so bad, and they'll consider it more seriously. And I think that's an important driver of growth.
Such an interesting perspective, where you could actually be empowered by crypto without actually being a holder or a user of it. People are sort of coming up and setting up business, perhaps in a local country. That was another thing too. Some of these countries around the world with large populations, like India, Indonesia, Turkey. I think a lot of crypto companies are looking there for, say, user adoption. But then there's other places like, say, the Bahamas, Gibraltar, Malta, who might be seeing it as an opportunity to attract crypto companies to come up and do business. Jillian, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of how crypto is being seen there?
Yeah. Before that, though, I kind of want to touch on this point that Basil made just now about growth of the crypto community. And you're going to have to remind me of your question, because I'm still stuck here. Right? But the growth of the crypto community and adoption, I always want to be very, very careful about how that really leads to empowerment. Because if we keep talking about the things that Constance mentioned, like the infrastructure, those things, even though there's a lot of confidence in there for the industry and the users, if you don't have access and if you don't have the infrastructure that's needed, then it still doesn't lead to empowerment. And so when we talk about growing this community, I mean, eventually, yes, we're gonna get there, but we really need to pop that bubble that keeps this in this space of gaining confidence through regulation. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't have regulation. We definitely need regulation, but we need to really, really figure out how crypto really powers through that bubble of a regulated space, Now remind me of your question.
No, I think that's such a good point, though. I'm glad you added it. No, I was just thinking, we're here in the Bahamas, and obviously there's been a lot of talk about, the opportunity in terms of attracting crypto companies here. And I was just wondering how you see the difference between, some of those larger countries that might be seen as a place for user adoption versus where a crypto company might even just come and set up business. Yeah,
so obviously the industry is causing some level of empowerment here. There's the knowledge share, there's the general excitement when you see conferences like Crypto Bahamas. There are the jobs that are created. There are any number of things. I think here, though, I also want to say that you always have to be careful about how those things really impact the community and if it is true empowerment. Of course, there's things to gain, but is it real and true empowerment? When you compare it to jurisdictions or countries where like India and the others that you mentioned, where there's a lot of people and industry wants to service those, I think it's great that we create a framework for a global asset and a global system to be able to service those countries. So I think our role here as the Bahamas and other small jurisdictions, Malta, Gibraltar, we can really create, because we're so small, the advantage is that we have less opinions and we have a better way to kind of create a really creative framework for crypto companies, crypto platforms to then go out into the bigger world and give the confidence that Basil actually just talked about.
Yeah.
So it's because crypto is global, so we can go into India, we can go into Turkey and really, really just empower the people there. As for us here, there's different levels of empowerment that we'll talk about later.
Yeah, and I really love your sober perspective on that as well. I kind of feel like sometimes in the crypto community it feels like everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid and we're empowering everyone, but it's important to go into this with our eyes open and recognize the barriers, the risks, and the challenges as well. I think that's how we can actually sort of create real change. We are down to our last minute 30. I'd love to hear final thoughts based on everything that we've discussed. Where do you see this space moving forward? You know, what needs to happen so that crypto can continue to empower people around the world? Constance, what do you think?
So I think the key is really to widen the pool. We need to build a bigger pie. On the relevant topic, a lot of something came to my mind just now. A lot of people ask me, how do you see Binance or Coinbase as competitors? I was like, right now, when we are at such early stage, everything's growing. There's no competitors. Everyone should be collaborators. We should be working together to widen the pool, push crypto forward, and build a bigger pie, not fighting within our land, right? So there's a much wider opportunity around the world with everyone. So I think how we empower everyone here in the space is really to work together.
Rising tide floats all boats. And what do you think, Basil?
I'm completely on the same page. I get asked as a smaller group with a smaller team in the UAE, having started more recently, the same question. Everyone knows Binance has set up quite a big operation in Dubai, and they say, how are you going to survive? I say, what do you mean? It's still early days. There's a big pie. There's a lot to be done, and there's a lot to collaborate. So it's about everyone collaborating together to find ways to improve the whole space.
And I think exactly the same thing, that collaboration is key. I think we need to field out a scope that's relevant to where we are now and make sure that we keep certain things in sight. I mean, we know we want to grow the community. We know we want to give access. We know we want to improve the infrastructure, and we know that we need to keep being creative and keep making sure that all the things that we do encompass the global citizenry. And so collaboration with a clear structure on what's needed and keeping that in focus is what I think is really important. Yeah.
This has been a brilliant discussion, both optimistic and pragmatic. I just want to thank you guys so much. And thanks for coming along and listening too.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Stay on.